16 famous actors who died from Alzheimer's disease. They made millions remember their faces, their voices, and their greatest roles. But in their final years, some of these beloved stars could no longer remember parts of their own lives. Alzheimer's took them away slowly, long before the final goodbye.
We were resting the horses one
Stay
day.
with us and subscribe to Classic Hollywood Legends for more stories Hollywood rarely tells. Eddie Albert. Eddie Albert spent decades playing men who seemed calm, sensible, and in control. Many Americans remember him best as Oliver Wendell Douglas on Green Acres, the lawyer who left New York for farm life, and then spent every episode trying to make sense of the strange world around him. He had a steady voice, a smart delivery, and the kind of presence that made viewers trust him. That is why his later years were so hard for his family and fans to accept. Alzheimer's disease slowly took away the clarity people had always associated with him. The man who once handled comedy with perfect timing began facing confusion, memory loss, and daily dependence. It was not the kind of struggle cameras could soften or scripts could fix. What happens when the person who always seemed steady starts needing help with everything? For Eddie Albert, that help came mostly from his son, Edward Albert. Instead of chasing more work in Hollywood, Edward stepped back and cared for his father. He protected him from public embarrassment and gave him the kind of quiet support that rarely gets headlines. It was a difficult reversal. The father who had once guided the son now needed the son to guide him through each day. Eddie Albert died in 2005 at the age of 99. To the public, he remained the familiar face from television and film. But his final chapter showed something more personal than fame. Alzheimer's took much from him, but it also revealed the loyalty of a son who stayed when the spotlight was gone. James Doohan. James Doohan will always be remembered by many viewers as Scotty from Star Trek. He played the engineer people trusted when the Enterprise was in trouble. Fans loved him because Scotty seemed practical, smart, and ready to fix almost anything. For years, that character made Doohan feel familiar to people who had never met him. But near the end of his life, Doohan faced problems no engineer could repair. In 2004, his Alzheimer's diagnosis became public. He was also dealing with other serious health issues, including Parkinson's disease and diabetes. For longtime fans, it was painful to hear that the man who played such a capable, sharp-minded character was now struggling with memory and daily life. How do fans say goodbye to someone who may no longer fully remember what he meant to them? That question became real when Doohan made some of his last public appearances. Even with his health declining, he still showed up for the people who had supported him for decades. He could not be the same man they remembered from television, but his presence still mattered. For many fans, seeing him one last time was less about celebrity and more about respect. James Doohan died in 2005 at the age of 85. Reports at the time said pneumonia and Alzheimer's disease were part of his death. His final years were not easy, but they did not erase what he gave to television history. To millions of people, he remained Scotty, the man who helped make Star Trek feel possible. Burgess Meredith. Burgess Meredith had a voice people recognized almost immediately. For older audiences, he was Mickey in Rocky, the tough trainer who pushed Rocky Balboa harder than anyone else would. For others, he was the Penguin in the 1960s, Batman series, strange, loud, and completely unforgettable. He was not the kind of actor who disappeared into the background. When he was on screen, people noticed him. That is what made his final years so painful. Meredith had built a long career on timing personality and sharp delivery, but Alzheimer's disease slowly took away the mental control that had helped make those performances work. Remembering lines became harder. Staying focused became more difficult. People around him had to adjust even when fans did not see what was happening behind the camera. How hard is it to watch a man known for his voice slowly lose his command of it? His health problems did not stop there. In his later years, Meredith was also dealing with melanoma, which made his decline even harder. The public remembered the strong, demanding trainer from Rocky, but the real man was facing illness from more than one direction. He continued to be respected, but his body and memory were failing. Burgess Meredith died in 1997 at the age of 89. Reports named complications from Alzheimer's disease and melanoma as part of his death. His ending was difficult, but it did not erase the work he left behind. For many viewers, his voice still brings back a whole era of movies and television. Glen Campbell. By the time Glen Campbell announced his Alzheimer's diagnosis, many Americans already knew his voice by heart. He remembered lyrics, guitar parts, stage cues, and songs that millions of Americans carried with them for decades. Hits like Rhinestone Cowboy and Wichita Lineman made him more than a country singer. He became part of American music history when Campbell was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2011. Many people thought he would leave the stage quietly. That would have been understandable. Alzheimer's affects memory, speech, focus, and the daily confidence a performer needs. But Campbell made a different choice. He and his family shared the diagnosis publicly, and then he went on a farewell tour. That tour was not easy to watch at times. There were moments when he forgot lyrics or needed help finding his place. Some nights were better than others, but when he held a guitar, a part of him still seemed to know what to do. The music did not leave all at once. How much of a person can remain when memory starts to fade? For Campbell, that question played out in front of real audiences. People were not just watching a concert. They were watching a man try to hold on to the thing that had defined his life. His family stood close, helping him through a difficult public goodbye with care and honesty. Glen Campbell died in 2017 at the age of 81. Alzheimer's took away much of his final years, but it did not erase the songs. For many fans, his last performances were painful, but also deeply human. Omar Sharif. Omar Sharif was remembered by many Americans through Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, but his career started long before Hollywood fully noticed him. He had already become a major star in Egyptian cinema, then moved into international films with a quiet confidence that made him stand out. He was not loud on screen. He did not need to be. His presence was calm, serious, and easy to remember. Away from acting, Sharif was known as a very intelligent man. He spoke several languages and was respected as a skilled bridge player. That is why the news about his Alzheimer's disease felt especially painful. The illness did not just affect a famous actor. It affected a man whose life had been built around memory, language travel, and sharp thinking. As the disease progressed, reports said, Sharif sometimes understood that people recognized him, but he could not always place the reason. Fans remembered the films clearly. He could not always do the same. That is one of the hardest parts of Alzheimer's. It can leave the world remembering your life better than you do. What happens when a man's history remains famous, but becomes harder for him to reach? One detail that stayed with many people involved Peter O'Toole, his friend and co-star from Lawrence of Arabia. Even after being told O'Toole had died, Sharif reportedly asked about him again later. The bond was still there, but the memory could not stay fixed. Omar Sharif died in 2015 at the age of 83 after a heart attack. His final years were marked by Alzheimer's, but his work did not disappear with the illness. Viewers can still return to the films and see the talent that made him known around the world. Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson's later life was kept much quieter than the tough image people knew from his movies. For years, audiences saw him in films like Death Wish, The Magnificent Seven, and The Great Escape. He often played men who said little, showed almost no fear, and handled trouble without asking anyone for help. That image became part of his identity. Bronson looked hard to reach, hard to scare, and hard to break. But old age and illness do not respect a movie image. As Alzheimer's disease became part of his life, the man known for control and silence had to face a condition that slowly took control away from him. His decline was not played out in public the way it was for some other stars. Bronson had already stepped back from acting, and his family kept much of his private struggle away from cameras. That may have protected his dignity, but it also meant fans saw very little of what was really happening. How does a man known for strength deal with a disease that makes strength almost useless? That is the sad part of Bronson's story. Alzheimer's does not care how tough a person once seemed. It affects memory, behavior, and independence. For someone whose screen image was built on self-reliance, needing care must have been a hard change for the people around him to witness. Charles Bronson died in 2003 at the age of 81. Many viewers still remember the hard stare, the quiet voice, and the roles that made him an action legend. But his last chapter reminds us that even the strongest screen heroes still face the same human limits as everyone else. Peter Falk. Most viewers knew Peter Falk as Lieutenant Columbo, the detective in the wrinkled raincoat, who always noticed what other people missed. He did not solve cases with force or intimidation. He solved them by paying attention. His slow walk, quiet questions, and famous "just one more thing" made him one of television's most recognizable characters. That made his later years especially difficult for longtime fans. Alzheimer's disease affected the same part of life that had made Columbo so memorable: memory, attention, and the ability to connect details. In public, Falk was still the actor people loved. At home, his condition was becoming more serious. Reports during his final years described confusion and a decline that his family could no longer ignore. Can you imagine forgetting the role that millions of people still remember you for? That is the painful part of Peter Falk's final chapter. People around the world could still picture Columbo clearly: the cigar, the coat, the careful questions, the small details that solved the case. But the actor himself was losing parts of his own connection to that history. Alzheimer's does not only affect facts, it can separate a person from the life they built. Peter Falk died in 2011 at the age of 83. To many fans, he will always be Columbo, one of the smartest and most unusual detectives ever put on television. His illness changed his final years, but it did not change the work he left behind. Every rerun still shows what made him special: patience, timing, humor, and a character people never stopped caring about. Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder's Alzheimer's diagnosis was not made public while he was alive. His family said that was his choice. He did not want the illness to become the way people saw him, especially children who still recognized him as Willy Wonka. That detail says a lot about the kind of person he was. Even while facing a disease that was taking pieces of his own life away, he was still thinking about how other people would feel. For many viewers, Wilder meant laughter. He was remembered for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Young Frankenstein, The Producers, and Blazing Saddles. His comedy was not loud in a simple way. It came from timing, nervous energy, and the strange way he could look gentle and unpredictable at the same time. That made his illness feel especially sad to fans who learned about it only after his death. How much kindness does it take to protect other people while you are the one suffering? Wilder lived with Alzheimer's privately for about 3 years. His family later explained that he wanted children to keep smiling when they thought of Willy Wonka, not feel confused or hurt by seeing the illness. That was not about pride. It was about protecting a feeling his work had given people for decades. Gene Wilder died in 2016 at the age of 83 from complications of Alzheimer's disease. His final years were kept quiet, but the reason behind that silence made many people respect him even more. He gave audiences laughter, strange magic, and some of the most memorable comedy moments in American film. In the end, he also left behind a simple example of care. Even when he was losing parts of himself, he still wanted the world to keep one more smile. Charlton Heston. In 2002, Charlton Heston stood before the public and shared news that many stars would have kept private. He said he had symptoms consistent with Alzheimer's disease. There was no big performance in the announcement. He spoke calmly like a man who understood what might be coming and wanted to say the truth while he still could. That moment meant a lot because of the kind of roles Heston had played. Audiences remembered him from the 10 Commandments, Ben-Hur, and Planet of the Apes. He often played men with strong voices, firm beliefs, and a sense of command. Whether people agreed with his politics or not, there was no denying that Heston had a presence. He looked like someone who could stand in front of a crowd and be heard. What does it take for a proud man to admit he may one day lose control of his own mind? That question made his announcement feel personal. Heston did not try to pretend the disease was small. He understood that Alzheimer's could change his memory, his speech, and the way he recognized the people closest to him. By speaking openly, he gave families dealing with the same illness a public example of honesty. After that, Heston slowly stepped away from public life. His final years were quieter, spent mostly with family, away from the image that had followed him for decades. He died in 2008 at the age of 84. Charlton Heston left behind many famous roles, but his final public act was not a movie scene. It was a direct admission of fear, dignity, and reality. For many people, that made him seem more human than any heroic role ever could. Rita Hayworth. For many older movie fans, Rita Hayworth will always be remembered through Gilda. The hair, the smile, and the famous screen presence made her one of the biggest stars of the 1940s. During World War II, her image was everywhere, and Hollywood sold her as a symbol of beauty and confidence. But the woman behind that image had a much harder life than the posters suggested. Years later, when Rita began acting confused or upset in public, many people misunderstood what was happening. Some assumed she had a drinking problem. Others thought she was simply difficult or aging badly. At that time, Alzheimer's disease was not widely understood, especially when it affected someone younger than people expected. Because of that, her symptoms were judged before they were properly explained. How many people were criticized before anyone realized they were actually sick? That question fits Rita Hayworth's final years. She was eventually diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and that diagnosis changed the way people looked back at her behavior. What had seemed like scandal or personal failure was really part of a serious illness that was taking away her memory independence and sense of control. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, became one of the people who helped bring public attention to Alzheimer's. By speaking about her mother's condition, she helped families understand that this disease was not shameful and not something to hide. Rita Hayworth died in 1987 at the age of 68. Her final years were painful, but they also helped open a larger conversation. The same woman once remembered for Hollywood glamour helped make Alzheimer's harder for the world to ignore. Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's story became public in 1994 when he wrote a letter to the American people. By then, he had already lived a life few people could compare with. He had been a Hollywood actor, a union leader, governor of California, and then the 40th president of the United States. Millions knew his voice, his smile, and the calm way he spoke during difficult moments. That made the announcement feel personal to many Americans. Reagan had built much of his public life on communication. People called him the great communicator because he knew how to speak clearly and make complicated moments feel understandable. But Alzheimer's disease attacks memory, language, and recognition. For a man whose career depended so much on words, the diagnosis carried a painful weight. What does a man known for speaking to a nation do when words and memories begin to slip away? Reagan chose to tell the truth while he still could. His letter was simple and direct. He admitted that he was beginning a difficult journey, and that in time the disease would affect him more deeply. After that, he slowly stepped away from public life. His wife, Nancy Reagan, became his main protector and caregiver during the years that followed. Ronald Reagan died in 2004 at the age of 93. His final decade was shaped by Alzheimer's, but his public announcement helped many families feel less alone. Whatever people thought of his politics, his illness showed a side of him that was very human, a famous man facing a disease that no title, office, or reputation could stop. Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett was one of the last great voices from an older era of American music. For decades, he sang standards with a calm style that never felt forced. Songs like "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" made him famous, but what kept him respected was the way he stayed true to his sound. Even as music changed around him, Bennett remained Bennett. Later in life, he also found a new audience through his work with Lady Gaga. That gave younger listeners a chance to see what older fans had known for years. Tony Bennett was not just a singer with a famous song. He was a professional who understood timing, emotion, and the value of doing a song properly. His Alzheimer's diagnosis came in 2016, though his family did not make it public until 2021. By then, the disease had already affected parts of his daily life. Conversations became harder, and ordinary memories were not always easy for him to reach. But music stayed with him longer than many people expected. When he sang, there were moments when the old Tony seemed to come back. How can a song remain when so many memories begin to fade? That question made his final performances especially moving. Audiences were not just watching a famous singer near the end of his career. They were watching a man hold on to the part of himself that had carried him for most of his life. Tony Bennett died in 2023 at the age of 96. Alzheimer's shaped his final years, but it did not define his whole story. For many people, his voice still brings back a style of music that feels honest, steady, and deeply American. Angela Lansbury. Angela Lansbury had one of the longest careers in American entertainment. Older audiences knew her from classic films, Broadway, and television, but many remembered her best as Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote. For years, she played a calm, intelligent woman who solved crimes by noticing small details others missed. That role made her a familiar presence in millions of homes. Because of that image, it is easy to understand why people connect her name with memory and old age. Jessica Fletcher was sharp, patient, and always able to put the pieces together. Angela Lansbury herself kept working far longer than most performers, appearing on stage and screen well into her later years. She became a symbol of discipline, professionalism, and quiet strength. But should we repeat a claim about someone's health if the public record does not clearly prove it? That question matters here. Some online stories place Angela Lansbury in discussions about Alzheimer's, but the reliable public reports about her death do not clearly say she died from the disease. Her family announced that she died peacefully in her sleep at her home in Los Angeles, just days before her 97th birthday. So her story should be told carefully. Angela Lansbury's legacy does not need a forced tragedy to feel meaningful. She gave audiences decades of work, from film roles to Broadway performances, to one of television's most beloved mystery characters. She died in 2022 at the age of 96. What remains is not a confirmed Alzheimer's story, but the memory of a performer who stayed respected across generations. Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks belongs in this story for a different reason than the movie stars and singers. She was not an actress, but her name became part of American history. In 1955, she refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama. That decision helped start the Montgomery bus boycott and made her one of the most respected figures in the civil rights movement. For decades, Parks was remembered as a woman of quiet courage. She was not loud, dramatic, or trying to become famous. She simply stood her ground at a time when doing so came with real danger. Her action cost her privacy, peace, and safety, but it also helped push the country toward change. Later in life, Parks faced a much more private struggle. Reports confirmed that she had dementia, and by her final years, her health had become fragile. That was painful for many people to accept, because her public life was so closely connected to memory. Americans remembered what she did, where she sat, and what that moment meant. What happens when a nation remembers your courage, but your own mind begins to fail? Rosa Parks died in 2005 at the age of 92. Her final years were quieter than the history attached to her name, but they did not reduce what she had done. Dementia may have affected her memory, but it could not change the meaning of her actions. Her place in history remains secure because one decision on one bus helped move millions of people. That is why her name still matters long after the illness and the final years. Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson was one of the greatest boxers America ever produced. Long before modern fighters became global brands, Robinson had already built the standard many champions were measured against. He was fast, smart, and hard to figure out in the ring. Fighters studied him, writers praised him, and fans remembered the way he moved as much as the victories themselves. His career was built on timing awareness and quick decisions. In boxing, memory is not only about remembering names or places. A fighter has to remember patterns, habits, openings, and danger in a fraction of a second. Robinson did that better than almost anyone. That is why his later battle with Alzheimer's felt so hard to accept. The disease came after the crowds were gone, and the titles were already part of history. Reports said Robinson lived with Alzheimer's for years before his death. He also dealt with other serious health problems, including diabetes and hypertension. For a man once known for control inside the ring, the final years were very different from the image fans carried in their minds. What happens when a champion can no longer fight the thing hurting him most? Sugar Ray Robinson died in 1989 at the age of 67. His final years were difficult, but they did not take away what he had done. He remained a major figure in boxing history, not because of one fight, but because of the standard he set over a long career. Alzheimer's changed his last chapter, but it did not change his place in sports. To many boxing fans, Sugar Ray Robinson is still the name people mention when they talk about greatness. Estelle Getty. Estelle Getty became a television favorite because of The Golden Girls. As Sophia Petrillo, she played the oldest woman in the group, even though she was younger than some of her co-stars. Viewers loved her sharp replies, dry humor, and the way she could steal a scene with one short line. She made Sophia feel tough, funny, and honest. Behind the scenes, things were not always that easy. Getty sometimes struggled with lines, and what first looked like nerves or aging later became part of a much more serious health problem. Her condition was eventually reported as Lewy body dementia, a form of dementia that can affect memory, movement, focus, and behavior. It is often confused with Alzheimer's, which is why her name appears in many discussions about the disease. How painful is it when the woman known for quick comebacks starts losing the words herself? That question makes her final years hard to think about. The public kept laughing at Sophia's jokes in reruns, but Estelle Getty was facing a private decline. By the 2000s, her health had worsened, and she was no longer able to take part in reunions the way fans hoped. Estelle Getty died in 2008 at the age of 84. Her illness changed the end of her life, but it did not take away what she gave to television. For many people, Sophia Petrillo remains one of the most memorable characters in American sitcom history.